Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What You Say Anime. I'm your host, Peter. On today's episode, we will be reviewing the brand new Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli film, The Boy and the Heron. Now, I have seen a lot of anime, but one thing that I lack, in particular, is movies. So just like in an episode of Pawn Stars, when you don't know the value of something, you call in an expert. And that's what I did today. The biggest Ghibli fan and historian that I know of, we have Kazet. Thank you for joining me today. Would you like to introduce yourself to the people? Maybe give some of your favorite animes to get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. And yes, I am a huge Ghibli fan. I literally have a wall dedicated to Ghibli right in my
It's
apartment.
beautiful.
Thank you. I love a lot of things, but I would say I'm not a big shonen action fan, so slice of life romance are definitely my jam. And obviously Studio Ghibli. I think there's only one film I haven't watched yet, but I've watched pretty much every Ghibli movie. But I love Violet Evergarden, Laid Back Camp, Skip and Loafer, Kimi Todoke, all that jazz. But Studio Ghibli has like my heart. I cry watching all the movies. I rewatch them all the time. So that's me.
I'm so glad that you can come on because I am severely lacking not only in Ghibli but movies in general. So I'm gonna need to get some of your input on some of the things that we're gonna talk about and see if we can compare and contrast with some other Ghibli films that you have seen and some that I have seen as well. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But before we dive into The Boy and the Heron, we always like to talk about our movie going experience. Since I guess for the last year we've probably been able to, but a lot of times since COVID we weren't able to go to movies and stuff like that. So we like to get a movie going experience. So tell me about your experience seeing it. How was it? Was there a bunch of people? What was the environment like over where you live?
It was absolutely packed, but I kind of predicted that because where I live, there's a bunch of anime fans, and I also live in a very dense downtown city. So, but it was an amazing audience because I think the last few anime films that I've watched, there's been a lot of rude anime fans in the theater who talk, come in late, but like everybody came on time. Everyone sat down, they were quiet, there was no phones out, no one was recording, I don't think. So it was a perfect audience. And I think it's because I watched an advanced screening. So I think like actual Ghibli fans actually came to that. So I was very pleasantly surprised. I got an amazing seat. I was a little stressed out last week because everybody else got early tickets and Canada was still waiting till like the last minute. So, but it was an incredible experience. There was a girl next to me that was like making very loud vocal reactions to the film, but I actually thought it was pretty funny. So, but it was perfect. It was a perfect viewing. The only thing that was a bit of a downer is that as soon as the credits rolled, like I wanted to listen to the song and see the lyrics, but unfortunately everybody was standing up, and so I couldn't actually see the lyrics. So I actually went home and watched the song myself. So
Right
yeah,
on. Yeah, I think I had very similar. When I bought my tickets, I was like the only like I would say like there was probably like 10 tickets sold. And where I live, it could be hit or miss. Like when I went and saw Silent Voice when it redid it, there was like 4 people. But then when I saw the Konosuba movie, it was sold out. So like I never know what to expect.
yeah,
So it was sold out here as well. I also had experience with the dude next to me was making very loud grunts and moans at certain points. I felt like he was the only person in the theater reacting to it. I'm like, my man, like I'm also enjoying this, but he's just like, ugh, ugh. I'm like, all right, like I don't know what's going on in this movie that would like adequate to that type of response, but yeah, it's always fun to get together with people and watch anime films because it wasn't an experience I got to do for like 2 years. So now I'm really happy to enjoy it, and this is seeing it on IMAX was a hell of an experience. If you have the opportunity to see this in IMAX, I would recommend it because I think I paid $20. I would have paid 50.
I used a gift card, so it felt free. That's
Hell
girl
yeah,
math.
that's awesome.
That was girl math for me. But
That
say this is like the first Ghibli film on IMAX, and so I think that's what made me super excited for it. And it actually was the first Ghibli film I've seen in theaters because I regretted for years I didn't see The Wind Rises in theater because I could have and I didn't. So like finally made up for it. So very happy about it.
That's awesome. So that was our movie going experience. Let's dive into the actual film itself, The Boy and the Heron. I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about was the main character Mahito and his arc and his journey through this story. So I guess me starting out, I thought it was kind of he seemed very traditional and very, like following the order. And then as the movie went along, I felt that he opened up more, especially with the Natsuko, his new mother character, and really enjoyed that progression throughout the story because he had it seems to me like he had very strong ties to his mother, and his father maybe not as much as somebody who's like trying to connect with like how I viewed like my dad. It didn't seem like he had that connection with like his father, like the way he did with his mother. So I guess I want to get your perspective and your thoughts on Mahito as a character in general.
Yeah, so like at the beginning of the film, he kind of seemed like a brat because he felt very standoffish with Natsuko because, you know, she's welcoming him to her home. But then once I actually started thinking about it, like the first scene was just so harrowing because he literally just went through trauma. Like there was a war, his mother obviously passed away. So I think that significant part of his life was so traumatic that it affected him. So I think I realized why he was being a brat was just because he was now forced to change his life, like move away from Tokyo, go to the suburbs, I guess,
Mhm.
and then change his life. Like his dad's already moved on,
Yeah,
and
that
then
happened really fast.
that happened really fast. They already have a kid. And then what's funny is that like I was like, okay, Natsuko seems like a really nice person. Like I don't understand why he's being standoffish. And then it's revealed that like she's his aunt.
Yeah,
So that was like, oh my god, like that. The girl next to me was like, whoa. So yeah, but I think him as a character, I understand what he was feeling. Like he's a kid. Like what he went
for
through
sure.
was so traumatizing, and he lost his mother, and that's something that like none of us want to go through. But I started to understand him, and then you can see him perk back up because he obviously met the Heron, and then he opened up, and I think that's something that's really beautiful in the story.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a traditional thing back in like that time in Japan where like if I don't know, they have some family traditions that I'm not necessarily familiar with, but I thought it was kind of odd that like it's like his aunt is now his new mom. I was like, is that like a thing where like if the mom dies, he marries his her sister? Like, am I missing something? Like to me,
I,
that's what it felt like, but I wasn't sure.
it just sounded, it seemed like the norm. Like everyone was like, yeah, like you're moving in, like this is your aunt. You look, and then like everyone was like, you look so much like your mom. Like that was pointed out so many times. I'm like, this is really weird. It's
Mhm.
very weird. But maybe it's normal. I don't know. But I was like, I understand why he was a bit standoffish with her. So
Yeah, and I did like by the end of the movie, even there's points where like he was like trying to call her mom, where she's like he kept calling her like Natsuko because we watched it in sub. It was like
yeah,
Natsuko Okaza. Like he wouldn't say just Okaza, he would say like Natsuka Okaza. So like him like trying to open up to her as a mom, I thought that was kind of I mean, that takes a lot out of somebody to like, you lose probably your favorite person and now you have to call somebody else your mom. That took a lot of guts. And seeing that transition, calling her Natsuko to Natsuko Okaza was really emotional, honestly. Like, that's a lot for like was he sixth grader, I think? So,
yeah,
props to that sixth grader.
yeah. That really grabbed my heart when he called her mom. But
Mhm.
also, it's like he was so quiet for like a big chunk of the movie. So then hearing him actually like, because he was talking like being polite and saying thank you and whatever, but all of a sudden he opened up and then he called her mom was just very like, I didn't cry, but I was definitely gonna shed a tear.
Yeah,
So
it hit me in the feels a little bit for sure.
yeah.
So I guess in terms of Ghibli MCs, how does Mahito compare to some of the other ones that you've seen?
I'm a little biased because the thing is, I love most of the things that I read and watch is with female lead characters because I love having strong female characters. But when I look at all the Ghibli films, a majority of the characters are female. So if I compared him with the other male MCs, I think I like his arc. He's not my favorite, but I do like his arc. But he's not my favorite MC. I wouldn't say that. No.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna stand out like a Howl or something like that, but I did enjoy him as like as an adolescent male character. I thought he was very solid. No real complaints. Diving into the movie though, we begin our journey, and this is sort of where I was a little bit I should say a little bit. I was a lot of it just absolutely blown away by this film. How Ghibli uses fire to me really stands out. With like if we look at like Howl and how Calcifer is drawn with fire, it's more in a silly comedic form. How they like use the blur effect in the fire in the opening scene, I thought was just absolutely brilliant. This is honestly one of the most beautiful like animated films I've like ever seen. This was so crisp and polished in so many different ways. I want to get your thoughts on not just the opening scene for sure, because I think that's a huge standout in terms of animation, but the animation quality in general in this film.
Yeah, totally. I think the first scene is so important because it showed what trauma Mahito went through. Because as a child, because you saw that everything was blurred, faces were blurred, and like as a child, that's how you remember trauma. Because like that time in his life was such a blur because all he was focusing on was trying to find his mom. And so like I understand the direction of what the way it looked because all you saw was fire and blurred out faces and everything was so blurred. And on like I felt like I was being suffocated because that's how the impact of the film. So I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And also because like on IMAX, like every single backdrop, every single character, it's meticulously painted. Like there's no CGI. It might have been like one or two CGI.
Maybe a little bit, but nothing that stood out.
Yeah, I think like the one scene I remember is like him climbing up the stairs, like in the first 1 second. But it was beautiful. I think it was probably the most beautiful film that I've seen. And I think like this really goes to show like everything that Miyazaki has done over the years. This is like the pinnacle of it. Like, and this was technically going to be his final film, so this did feel like it was going to be his goodbye. But the animation, the paintings were so gorgeous. Like I want that on my wall.
Yeah.
Like, I just something. It's just so beautiful. So it's definitely in the top tier of Ghibli films the way it looks.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like animation, in terms of the movies I've seen, like I was like, is this better animated than like 3.0 plus 1.0? I thought it was like that level of quality. Like I was just blown away by. There's moments of the opening scene with the fire, the blur effects that they use with the smoke mixed in with like. There's a lot of times studios use CG for fire. This was not CG fire, and you could tell, and I just love that. To some of the more acrylic and watercolored like scenes that they've used in this. There's like a specific scene where he goes to fight the heron in like the morning, and the sun's like coming up, and the heron's coming straight at him from the point of view of the sun, or looking at the sun. And it was such a unique style because it looked kind of like screen, like they put like a, how do I describe this? It feels like they put like a screen over it, so it was a little blurred, but in a different way than like the fire. I was just like, Jesus, like they are going all out on this. It was, oh my god. And then like the movements, drawing movements is so hard, and how they just everything looks so crisp. Because a lot of times, like what I've seen in anime is like the backgrounds will move with the characters while they're moving. There's scenes where just the background is absolutely still, and the characters are just moving by themselves. And so it doesn't give the illusion of like blurring it with the movement. It's just crisp, clean movement. I gotta give it props. It was so good. It was so good.
Even felt like the heron was going to fly at me. Like,
Yeah,
so,
right? If you had like the 4D glasses on or something, and you're watching one of those movies, like, oh,
yeah. Like even with the sound, like I don't know if we want to talk about sound right now, but I think
yeah.
The most amazing sound I've heard in a Ghibli film, but I don't know if it's because it was made for IMAX and IMAX maybe might have enhanced it, but like the flapping of the heron, I felt like it was in the room with me.
Mhm.
It was just amazing.
No, it's the same way when I saw like a Pro-Mare on IMAX, where I'm like, this film was made for IMAX, where if you watch this on like your TV or iPad or something like that, it's probably not going to hit the same, but I'm basing it off of the quality that I saw at the time. And yeah, like the sound effects, like the flapping of the wings, I felt it was like right behind my ear. Like I was like, oh my god, is there a bird behind me? I was like, this is there's so when he was like drinking water out of like the little glass teacup thing, I could hear every gulp of water he was drinking. I was like, my god, whoever is the sound director of this, give them a blank check, because that was chef's kiss.
You know, like that scene where they're cutting that fish and you can actually hear like the guts. That was kind of gross, but
yeah, it was gross, but it's beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. And then the music itself, there's so many moments in the OST where there's quiet moments where, you know, I don't know if it was like not an oboe, like a clarinet or something like that, and it's just like calm music with like when he's like entering the tower, to more of the intense scenes with like the Parakeet King, where it's a little bit more high action, a little bit more movement, a little bit more emotions going on in the scenes where it was raised and had a little bit of an orchestra feel. How did you feel about the OST in general and the score?
Well, I'll say this right now. I'm as much as I am a Ghibli film fanatic, I'm also a Joe Hisaishi fan. He is my favorite composer of all time. Like, I'm literally seeing him in concert in a few months. I would say this is not my favorite OST from him, but I think the way that his approach to doing the music in this film it made sense for the film because it felt it's more subdued, I think, compared to a lot of OSTs he's done, because we're very used to like his crescendos and the loud
Mhm.
booms. Like in Spirited Away, when you saw like the spa house and like you hear this big boom and the music is very grandiose. But in this film, I think he took a more subdued approach and it's more quiet. I think it's because Mahito himself is a quiet person. So I think seeing Mahito's journey where he's quiet, then all of a sudden he starts to open up. I think that's the direction of how the music went. Because I actually listened to the soundtrack last night and this morning, and I bawled my eyes out last night actually. But I was listening. I don't know what happened. I started listening to it and I started crying. But when you hear the soundtrack from the beginning to end, you can actually hear Mahito's journey and how he just opened up. And I think it's so beautiful what Joe Hisaishi did. So yeah.
What is your favorite score or OST from him?
Oh, that's like asking me my favorite Ghibli film, Pete.
Who's your favorite kid? Yeah.
Oh my god. I think Spirited Away is definitely one that like makes me it's one of my favorites. I think Spirited Away is definitely one of the top tier entirely. I think from beginning to end that's the soundtrack where I'm like I just sit there. Like when I listen to it, I'm like transported in another world. But there's a lot of Ghibli soundtracks that I love so much. And there's a lot of themes that he's written that are so significant. And the theme that he wrote for this movie, like if you look at the soundtrack, I think it's called Ask Me Why, but there's like at least 4 or 5 different versions of it. And it starts off as really quiet. And then I think the last version is the one I cried at, but it's about his mom. So, but yeah, I would say Spirited Away is my favorite, but my answer might change tomorrow. So
Gotcha.
no one count to it.
Right on, right on. So one of the questions that you brought up that I want to get into is for the English version of this film, it's called The Boy and the Heron. The Japanese like translation is "How do you live?" And they even say that in the film. They say "How do you live?" And
Yeah.
I thought this was an interesting question because with these two titles, and this is where I kind of want to get a little off track. I felt like this was 2 movies in one, where I thought the first half of the movie was The Boy and the Heron, and then the second part of it was How Do You Live? Because
Mhm.
the whole part to me was of the in the tower was deciding on how he wants to live. He's making the decisions of his life. And to me, it was something special with how they handled this. And maybe before I devolve into this, but I guess I want to get your thoughts on like the better fit. Would you rather it be How Do You Live or do you prefer The Boy and the Heron?
Mhm. I think The Boy and the Heron is simple terms of what
Mhm.
the film's about because in a way it's enemies to I wouldn't say lovers, but enemies to besties. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's enemies to besties, and like that's a chunk of the film, but it's not the entire film. So I think How Do You Live does span because like it doesn't answer the question How do you live? It's more like asking us and asking Mahito how does he choose to live? And I thought it was interesting. It was about like when we saw the book and it said, "How do you live?" And then I actually looked it up. It actually is a real book,
Oh,
but it's
interesting.
yeah, but it has nothing to do with this movie. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I do feel the way that you feel, where like it does feel like 2 halves because the Heron wasn't really there at the second half of the film. Like he was there, but he also wasn't there.
He was like a
So
different person. It was like, like the mask is on versus the mask is off type of thing for
yeah,
like who he was as a character.
yeah. But I think also How Do You Live kind of fits through the entire film because Mahito is at this point in his life where he was stagnant. He didn't want to move forward because he's gone through this trauma and he didn't want to move forward. Like he didn't want to go to school. He didn't want to like connect with his new mom. And
Mhm.
so he was kind of stagnant and he just didn't know how to move past it and live. So I think like that title makes sense for the entire movie to me. But then The Boy and the Heron does, a chunk of the film. So I personally am on team How Do You Live? I think it makes more sense to me in that way. But I think The Boy and the Heron probably would attract more North American audiences.
I agree. Yeah, I do think that title translates a little bit better. With that, the How Do You Live, I thought there was a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong because you've seen way more than I have, but from what I've seen, in a lot of Miyazaki films, there's obviously a theme or a message. Where like Princess Mononoke, it could be something as simple as like stop destroying the environment. And Grave of the Fireflies, war is bad. Like it's pretty simple. With this, I felt like the message and theming was more than just one thing. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit because we see it early in the film with sort of like a war era. They move out to the country. His dad works at a factory or owns the factory. We find out later that the factory produces it looks like the glass or the shields for like the fighter pilots or the fighter jets for I'm assuming it's World War II. So this is like either pre-World War II or currently going on in World War II. And I know that Miyazaki likes to put in stuff about war, but more importantly, like aviation. He's a huge like aviation fan. So
Mhm.
I thought that message was pretty clear. I should say not message, but like he likes to always throw in those themes. Did you catch that at all? And then did you have anything run through your mind when you saw that at all?
Mhm. I think there's a lot of common themes with a lot of Ghibli films. I think for the most part, the whole protecting the earth thing, that's a theme that's in pretty much every, if not all, Ghibli films, like
Yeah.
that I can think of. In terms of the war theme, yeah, like I can see, like when you look at like Howl's Moving Castle, it was very anti-war as well. I wouldn't say this movie focused a lot on war. I think it focused more on the people affected by war, which
Yes.
is a lot like Grave of the Fireflies. I don't know if you ever watched that one yet, but that one's traumatic.
Very.
Um, but it reminded me of Grave of the Fireflies, where it's more about the people affected by war. So I think it's still anti-war, where it's like it's about the people that were affected by it and how do they move forward,
Mhm.
which is another theme that a lot of Ghibli films have, like Up from Poppy Hill is about post-war and how a family's moving on without their father. So I think it's a very common theme in Ghibli films.
Right on. I guess my favorite part of like theming and like symbolism and all this with this was the 13 blocks with his uncle. So how this I interpreted it as is each block represented like a generation, and you build on top of each other to create this world. Mahito is tasked with stacking the blocks, and, but not only stacking the blocks, he's given a piece himself. So he's like the next piece of stacking it, and you see how it's different shape. Like each generation is not the same, but we're living in the same world. We create this world. So it's how do you want to create the next generation? And that's what I was taking from it, and I just thought how that was represented was absolutely brilliant. I thought it was absolutely genius that, like, at some points, we're together, but we're about to tip over, and I feel like that's like that in life, where, like, I feel like we're at a breaking point at certain points, and at any moment, it could topple over, but sometimes we hold on, and then we create the next generation, or we create the next piece of this world, and it's up to us how we decide on how we stack it. And that's what
Mhm.
really stuck out to me. I don't know if you had a specific, like, symbolism or a theme or message that really stuck with you with this movie, but to me, that's what was like, yes, that was absolutely brilliant to me.
Mhm. I think I forgot what the quote was at the end of the movie, but I think it was like, um, "We don't have much time. This is going to last a day," or something like this world's going to last a
Yeah.
day. So for me, the theme for me was like, life's too short. So you got to choose how you're going to live. Like
Mhm.
that's how I interpret it. But like the whole like stacking blocks, I didn't even think about that. Like that kind of went over my head. So
Oh, okay.
I will say like this movie, it's one of the ones that went a bit over my head where I feel like I need to watch it another few times to really like pick and pick its brains, I guess. Because that part went over my head because I was like, "Ooh, cool blocks," but I was also like amazed by the cinematography that I was like, "Oh, I should actually be really thinking about this." But yeah.
I think there's a lot because there's another one that with the pelicans talking about how, they weren't necessarily wanting to eat the oh my god, what they called the Nawas? Something like
Oh,
that?
was it Wara Wara or Nara?
The Wara Wars? Yeah.
Two
Like,
things.
the dying pelican was like, like, we didn't want to do this necessarily, like, there's no fish in the sea. I
Mhm.
wasn't sure if that was, like, a thing with, like, overfishing and stuff. Because like,
Yeah.
if you've ever seen, like, Akira has a clear message about, like, Japanese society in the '80s, but how, like,
Mhm.
we interpret it is completely different than how the Japanese interpret it. This was
Mhm.
one where I was like, "Is this something that's specifically targeted for like a Japanese audience, or is there something that I can relate to? And I know overfishing is like a huge thing, and that's also like part of like the ecosystem and world messaging that Miyazaki likes to put in his films. But that was the one, like another one where like he's not putting this in for just like there's a specific reason why the dying pelican is saying these words.
Mhm.
And that's always something I try to like take from these things. Like, why is this scene in the movie? What is its
Yeah,
purpose?
I don't know, but now I'm starting to think about sea turtles.
Yeah.
Because in sea turtles, they hatch their eggs and the little kids have to like go to the ocean, and
That
that
that's what I initially thought, like, oh my god, and the Wara oh my god, I gotta look it up, but, like, yeah, those
they're like
characters were like, "Oh, these are like sea turtles," like, the Waras, okay, they're called
Bora
Wara
Bora.
like, for every 100 sea turtles that get hatched, like, 3 survive or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of felt like the circle of life, to be quite honest.
Mhm. But, like,
Yeah,
there's so many, like, other messages that I think it could be because, like, I think a lot of times in, like, anime and more like Japanese media and stuff with like, like what's it called? Like the birth rates are declining and stuff like that. And like, is that a message about that? Like, I don't know. It's like there's so many things that just were like my mind was going at like 100 miles an hour while I was watching this. It's like, what is he
yeah.
trying to say? What does this mean? Like, oh my god, there were so many like other I was just say so many, but there was a few other moments that were just like the the purpose of this scene. What is it trying to tell me? One of them that I don't get at all was sort of the birthing room scene with like the mummy wraps.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Like that scene means something. I don't know what it means though. Like dang
I
it, I was hoping you could tell me.
was so good. Yeah, I was so good. I just sat there. I'm like, okay, cool. He's gonna go save her, and then she says she hates him,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I can see that maybe she hates him because he was so like off-putting to her. So I can see that, but that was like really rough. Like I just didn't understand the birthing. I don't even understand why she was there. Like it's just
Yeah.
like I just that's the part where I'm like confused on. That's why I feel like I need to watch it again.
Yeah, the tower itself was like, in the beginning, the first part of the movie, it felt like a very traditional Japanese countryside movie, and then the second half is like Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, Willy Wonka, like what's
Yeah.
going on in this tower? Where I'm just trying to interpret, like, what do the parakeets mean? Like,
Oh
obviously,
my.
there's a bird theme that going on. We have the pelicans, we have the heron, and we have the parakeets. Like, there's something bird related with this. It's like somebody please tell me. Like, I don't know.
I need to like warn people if you're scared of birds, you might not like this movie.
Oh, speaking of, like, animation, when, like, the birds were flying through the tower into the real world, oh my god,
Oh,
that was so
oh,
good.
that was so cool. But yeah, the tower part, I will say, it did go over my head. And at some points I felt like, is there just too many ideas in this film? Like, is there just too much storytelling? Like, is it the world building? Is it
Mhm.
the but then I was also like, maybe I just need to watch this film a few more times to actually understand what his vision was. So
Man, I really hate to compare this movie to Evangelion, but I'm going to because Mahito really reminded me of Shinji and sort of like his battles with his I was just say his father, but like that was like a
yeah,
father mother thing too, and then this is like a father mother thing too. But like Evangelion has so many things in the story where like you need to like deep dive and research and understand like what this symbolism meant because there's so much in that. That's what this movie felt to me. Where like I need somebody to write a 30-minute video essay explaining to me what all of this meant because there's a reason why scenes are in this movie that I just don't get, and I just please somebody tell me. So, was
yeah.
there anything that went over your head that I didn't touch on? Because I feel like there's a lot in this movie.
I literally think it's just the second half. And what's funny is that when I think of all the Ghibli films that I've watched, they all have been like very straightforward. Like
Yes.
this is the one where it's like I need to think about this. Like this is the one where I'm like scratching my head. It's very similar to like when I walked out watching Everything Everywhere All at Once. I walked out of the theater and I was like, I need to think about this because that's the kind of film this is. But it really was the second half that went over my head. I don't understand the birds. The whole uncle thing was a bit odd, and like, where did this like tower come from? Who is the heron? That's the one thing that I was like, who is this guy? Because if he was a bird, and then slowly you see like these eyes come in from the mouth,
Yeah.
and I was like, who is like who? Because obviously he's not a real bird. So who is he? That went over my
Yeah.
head, and I didn't know if it was explained in the. I don't think it was.
I viewed him as like a guide in life or something like that, like something along those lines
Like
where
a cricket.
I don't know, like like sometimes like the people you follow give you bad advice or you do
Yeah.
something bad because of things around you, but then like when they show their true colors or something along those lines where they'll lead you to the path that you want to take or like the path you're willing to take with either like that person or people in general. And that's sort of like what I interpreted from it, but that might also be way too deep and it might not even be that complicated. It might just be a bird. Like that's the
Yeah,
thing. Like I
yeah.
don't know.
He just a character, you
Yeah,
know.
like I watched Totoro like for the first time like a month ago, and it was like so easy to understand.
Yeah,
And I just like and then I watched this, I'm like, hold on, this isn't Totoro. Like, no, what is
not
this?
Totoro. But also, like we're not asking who Totoro is either. So I think maybe he's just like a Totoro. Like we don't know where Totoro came from. We don't know who he is. He's just there. So that's
Yeah.
probably what this Heron guy is. But he was really ugly.
Yeah, he was. Oh, I mean I love like the design of like how ugly he was, but it was a really good ugly design if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was hilarious though. I really loved their relationship from the way that it grew. And I think that one scene where like they're trying to fix the hole in the beak,
Mhm. That
and
was
he
great.
was like, I'm gonna leave now, and then he's like, oh shit, and then they had to fix it again. Like I think it's just their companionship was probably the funniest thing in the movie. And I'm trying to think like if there's any other Ghibli films where that was this funny.
Mhm.
I can't think. I mean, I've laughed a few times in some Ghibli films, but I think this is the funniest one.
Yeah, it was an interesting mix because I felt like not only was this the one of the darker Ghibli films,
Yeah,
but also one of the funnier ones too that I saw. I was like, yeah, the theater was cracking up quite a bit. The scenes where like they were clubbing the parakeets while they were trying to escape, like our theater was cracking up. I thought that was a great scene. I had a lot of fun. Um,
yeah, yeah. I wouldn't. It's funny you say this is the darkest because when I walked out of the theater, I was like, this actually was pretty dark compared to most Ghibli films.
mhm.
Yeah,
'Cause it's just like it was like another thing with like, when I was watching Totoro, their mom is in the hospital, but at the end of the movie, like, it's fine, like, she's not going to die or
yeah,
anything, and then this is like, she's dead within the first 3 minutes or something like that. It's like, "Okay, we're going down this path. Okay, here we go." Yeah, so wanted to talk about was there any particular scenes in general that stood out to you, whether it was how good the food looked, how good the animation was, how good the sound was, something along those lines that were like didn't necessarily deal with like the themes or topics, or just like you thought that this was an awesome scene in general.
Well, food definitely, because I always talk about food. But I think one thing that Ghibli is very known for is the food they have in their movies. Like it's like everyone loves the food scenes, and there was even like a whole exhibit about the food in the movies at Ghibli Park, which is really wicked cool. I couldn't take any photos, but anyways, so in this film, there is food at the beginning of the movie, like for the first half. And what was so weird is that it didn't have the Ghibli gloss on it. Like all the food he was eating looked very drab, plain. There was no like hyper focus on it. Even like that scene with Kiriko, and she made him like some sort of stew or
Yeah, it
something.
was like meat and potatoes or something, and with some bread.
Yeah, even that looked drab. So I was sitting in the theater being like, this is really weird because all Ghibli food looks amazing. And then all of a sudden, he sits down with Kimi,
Yep.
and all she does, and you can see like as soon as the screen turns into the toast, and she's cutting the toast, and all of a sudden you can see the Ghibli shine of the food, where like she's cutting the toast. The butter looked like the best butter I've seen in life.
That was a
She's
lot of butter she put on too.
a lot of butter, and like the jam was glistening. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, so the food has a huge significant part of the film because Mahito's life was just very drab because he didn't really care about anything. Then all of a sudden he meets this girl who is apparently his mother, but he didn't know it. But she reminded him of the bread that his mom used to make. And all of a sudden his life just like brightened up a little more. So like the jam was like glistening, he was smiling, and I thought that that was such a significant part of the film because we're so used to like Ghibli food looking so amazing. All of a sudden, you can see how the way that the food looks also helped kind of carry the story as well. So that was something that I noticed.
No, for sure. With the food, because in the beginning with the meals that they're eating, since it is like either pre-war or current war, they reference it with like the cigarettes and stuff, where like they can't get some of the things that they're used to. Like cigarettes are so hard to come by. She asked like if they're smoking tobacco. It's like we can't get tobacco. I'm smoking on like a random leaf. And so like when he's eating in the beginning of the film, it's like rice and basic food, like nothing like glamorous because the resources are so hard to get in that time. And then the most delicious thing that we see, I'm supposed to put delicious in quotation marks, was when he was cutting open the fish. Not when the guts spilled out, but it looked like a big salmon sushi. Like it's about to
Yeah,
be
it did.
like it's like, oh, they're gonna eat really good like salmon or something like that. And then
Yeah.
he cuts a little bit too much and all the guts start pouring out. I was like, oh wow. But I thought like that the fish scene before the pre-guts was like, oh yeah, now we're cooking.
Yeah, yeah. But it was hilarious when just all the guts came out. I loved it. It was graphic.
It was graphic.
Probably the most graphic I've seen in a Ghibli film with guts coming out. So, it's a little gross.
It was a little excessive. Some of the like, oh, man, I really like the scene where they were racing up the tower against the Parakeet King, and
Mhm.
he's like knocking down all the floors. I thought how that was just animated with the motion was like really well done. I thought that stood out. And then the scene after where he's sort of like sneaking around and they're playing like tag behind like the shadows. I really enjoyed how that was like laid out, because there's this vast world that the parakeets thought was heaven, but it was really just like a conservatory type of deal. And I don't know, man. It was like I'm trying to think of like very specific parts, because the movie was so unique and different in this like Alice in Wonderland style like environment, where I think that's one thing that really stood out to me, and one thing I really enjoyed was not knowing what was around the corner because of
Yeah.
this tower. Like, what's going on? And I know we touched on it like a little bit before, but I think it was a little confusing at parts, a little convoluted, a little distorted, but I'm just trying to think in my mind like what that parakeet society meant. And my mind keeps going back to that.
I honestly I don't understand because we had the pelicans and like that golden gate. Like, what was that?
Yeah.
And then
Like they couldn't go. I thought he was like dying. Like that was like, you're going through the pearly gates or whatever.
yeah,
I thought like if he went through the gates, he was going to die, but it's more of like a taboo to go through it, because then he meets like the other Kiriko, and she saves him from the pelicans. Well, they couldn't eat him, but like sort of mauling at him. And that's like another thing. I'm like, what does this scene represent? Like, I don't get it. Oh
yeah.
man.
She did that like fire thing and she
Mhm.
like circled them. I was like, is this a blessing? Like I
Yeah.
was trying to understand what was going on. So
Yeah, because like how what like that version of Kiriko, because they stated earlier that like the housemaids have been working for the family for 60 years. And so this is like a younger version of herself helping the family still, like in a different way. So that's how I interpreted that. But I'm trying to think if there's
yeah.
like more to it.
Yeah. And even like the little dolls she had of like the other women, and she's like, don't touch them. But I was like, if he touches them, are they gonna come to life? Like I just started thinking about like what's the significance of all this?
Yeah, that was right through my mind too, because there's like 7 of them, and they kind of had like their own personalities. I was like, is this like the 7 dwarves? Like, what is that? What I'm supposed to interpret this as? There's just a
Yeah.
lot. That's why I guess my biggest takeaway from this movie was there's a lot going on. Probably need to rewatch this. I want to watch it in dub for sure.
Yeah, same.
But if anybody is listening to this episode and finds like a video or like a video essay about this, I would love to hear from it, because I need to dive in more to it. I think, is there anything else in particular that you would like to talk about?
One of the main themes in this movie, which isn't a lot of Ghibli films, is just about mother's love, and just not even just mothers, but even just female people who are taking care of kids. Because I feel like even like with Ponyo, even like Kiki's Delivery Service, A Mother's Love is something that's so important because I think a lot of Ghibli films are about kids and
Mhm.
about who is guardians, who's guarding them. And so I saw that through because obviously his mom passed away, but then Natsuko played this significant mother to him, and then also all the grannies did, and then Kiriko did. Like I thought that was such a beautiful theme throughout the movie, but it's also something that spans across a lot of Ghibli films. And I thought the grannies were my personal favorite. They were just like the funniest part of the movie. But I just love the way that they were taking care of him.
Yeah, when we got introduced to the grannies, I thought that based off their like how they were like circling around the suitcase, I thought that they might be something supernatural. I don't know, they're giving me a little creepy vibe, but by the end of it, I thought they were all fantastic. The way that they were like, they might be like 80 plus, but when they go looking for trouble, they got their brooms ready and they're out there
Mhm.
looking like they're out there fighting for this family. I was like, I love them. I love them a lot. That was
Yeah.
great.
I thought it was weird that he's never met them because if they're part of the family, I'm surprised that he's never met them or anything, but he also is pretty young.
Yeah, because I think they mentioned that like Natsuko met him when he was younger, so it could be where like maybe they did meet, but it was so like I don't remember stuff when I was like 2, like maybe they met when they were 2 and that memory is blank in their head or something along
Mhm.
those lines. Yeah, I think anything else from you that you want to get to? Otherwise we can get to like our final thoughts.
Yeah, we can get to our final thoughts. I do want to know if you would put The Boy and the Heron in your Ghibli starter pack because I'm referencing to a past episode.
Ah, love that. Would I put this in my Ghibli starter pack? I don't think so. I think like you said before that this was supposed to be his last work, and to me it felt like that. It felt like accumulation of a lot of things coming together where if he wanted to go out and it sounds like this is not his last movie, but like if he wanted to, I thought this was a great movie to go out to. I think there's a lot to digest. I think if there's anything missing from previous movies that he didn't get to do, he got to do it in this one. It felt, it just felt like a. I don't want to say a magnum opus. I don't want to say like this is like his best work because I don't think this is his best work that I've seen. But if someone told me that this was their favorite Ghibli film, I think I would get it. Especially if you like deep diving into things and man, I really don't want to make this comparison, but I'm going to. So my favorite director is like Satoshi Kon, and
Yeah.
he can dive into, you can watch Perfect Blue and then you can watch Millennium Actress, and you can see the range on sort of what he can do in his storytelling. And I think Miyazaki is the same. Where like you can write something like Totoro where it is meant for kids. It's it's a nice sibling imagination when you're a child going through this, and then you can write something like this where there's so many elements to it. If he wants to go that route, he's willing to be, this mastercraft of storytelling. And if he wants to throw in 1,000 different themes and symbolism, I think you should. And he did. And that's like one thing that I love about these types of films in general, whether it's Miyazaki or anybody else who you take a deep dive into something and then really go with it and really analyze it and really want to like make it your own. And that's what I felt. I felt like this is if he everything I felt it's like Miyazaki's like, yeah, I want to do this. And but in terms of a starter pack, no. I think you should watch like everything else before this. And that's not
I
to
will
say that
say,
this movie is bad. I think this movie is amazing. I just
mhm.
think like like the themes of like you said before, motherly characters, guardian characters about children. That's a theme throughout his films. You should watch that and understand those themes coming from him and then realize that it's coming through on this movie as well, but you need to see those other movies to grasp that. So for the starter pack, I would say no. But what about you? Would you?
I wouldn't, only because it's a lot. There's a lot of storytelling. I think it shows his strengths and it shows what he can do. But I think for a starter pack, you should see some of the earlier ones. Like I feel like this is probably a step above Spirited Away in terms of like world building and just like the fantasy elements. I think this is really out there.
It's yeah, I would
It's out
agree.
it's out there compared to like all his other films because I put Ghibli films in like two separate groups. they have their like fantasy movies, very like fantastical, where like, and it's most of everybody's favorites, like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. But then there's also the slice of life, more realistic ones. But this one falls obviously in the fantasy category. But I feel like it's way up there in terms of fantasy. That I feel like a lot of people, it might be a lot for some people starting off.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say a starter pack, but I think it was a gift for me as like someone who's watched almost all of them. So yeah, I wouldn't put it in a starter pack either.
Yeah, I think you should watch like Howl's first and understand like how he does like the different worlds with like the turning the knob and then going through the door type of thing. And then come to this because this is like a door with like 35 knobs. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought Howl's when they like looked at all the doors. I was like, that reminds me of Howl's. And then like with the gate, it actually reminded me of Suzume. But like just the doors remind me of Howl. There's a lot of significance in all these and throughout the movie that reminded me of other movies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like that I really like that symbolism of the doors with, you know, I'm going through this door because this is my path. And then, you know, like Himi's going through her door because that's her path. And it's like we're not all going through the same door. We might end up in the same spot, but we're all going through our journeys differently. And it's just so good. It was beautiful. Yeah, wrapping that into final thoughts. So this is where it'll be interesting because I'm gonna give you your time since you've seen so much, but I'll rattle it off first. I love movies that when I'm watching a scene, I want to know what's the meaning of this for? What is this text for? Why are they using this dialogue? What's the symbolism between these things? The 13 Stones really stood out to me. I really love that. That's one thing that is going to stick with me for a very long time with when somebody asks for like symbolism in anime, like that to me was one of the best things I've ever seen in anime with terms of symbolism. Stuff like that. I think the ball takeaway from both of us is we need to watch this movie again. We need to dive more. This is not something where if you watch this once and you understood everything, you're a PhD at MIT or something like that. Like you are galaxy brain level smart because I think I understood maybe half of it if I'm lucky. But I think that's the beauty of it. And it's the same thing. I really hate to do this comparison. It's the same thing when I watch Evangelion. The first time I watched it, I'm like, I did not get this at all. I did some research. I watched it again. I'm like, I get this way more and I love it. So I think this is a movie where the second time around, if I watch it, I feel like I'm really going to enjoy it. The only really negative thing was I thought this was kind of long. A little over 2 hours. I felt at some points I think some of the parts in the first half could have been cut. It just felt like it dragged just a little bit in the beginning where I was way more at the edge of my seat, but I understand that's sort of the build up for what's to come. I just felt at some points I'm just like, are we going to get to the next part? Because I feel like we've been here for a minute. Yeah, you know, like the dream scene with like his sword breaking and then him waking up and then the sword was real, but then he touched it and it broke. Almost like, I don't know. That's probably like another thing. I'm like, I bet at the time I didn't get it, but I feel like if I watched again, maybe there's something to it. But that's the scene. Like, I feel like he maybe could have cut that, but I could be completely wrong. But animation, one of the best animated movies I've ever seen in my life. I put this up there with like 3.0 plus 1.0. Like, I put it up there. That was S tier quality. It was insane. The score was great. Seeing it in IMAX was worth every penny. I think I'm gonna put this somewhere along the lines of like my second or third favorite Ghibli film ever. I don't think it's as good as Spirited Away. Spirited Away is my number one, but I think this is like on par with me with like Howl's. For like different reasons. Howl's I felt that has like a different message and I think a little easier to understand. But like, I love world building. I love the symbolism. I love the themes, and they did all of that. So at the end of the day, I think I gave this a 9. Like I really, really like this movie. What are your thoughts? Take all the time you need.
I've watched almost every. So the only film I have not finished is Tales of Earthsea, which is like out the bottom rank of most Ghibli rankings. I don't know if I would put it at my top because the way that I don't have rankings like number 1, number 2, I put my Ghibli films in like tiers.
Sure.
So my top tiers are the ones that like mean the most to me, and I'm emotionally attached. They just mean something very significant to me, and I cry all the time watching them. So I don't think The Boy and the Heron hits that point.
What are
that
those movies though that do hit?
For sure, Howl's Moving Castle, because I connect to Sophie like the most. I would say Whisper of the Heart is definitely up there. Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa, because of the strong female presence. Obviously, did I say Spirited Away? I did say Spirited Away, probably. Yeah, I don't know, just a bunch of them. I should probably post. I'll post my tier list somewhere, because I think someone on Twitter was arguing with me about a ranking that I had about Ghibli films. But so yeah, I wouldn't put it at the top ranking, but my top ranking is mostly with films that I rewatch all the time. So if they get there when I rewatch it a million times, and all of a sudden I develop this like emotional attachment to it. So I think I'll put it in the 9 out of 10 range.
Hey, let's go.
The problem I have is just it did the story. The story was a bit everywhere, so I think that's the thing where like I need to watch this at least 1 or 2 more times, which I'm definitely doing this month. I'm watching it at least 2 more times this month. So right now it's sitting at a 9. It might float a little bit lower, might float a little bit higher after my second or third viewing. But I really enjoyed it. I think it was very, very beautiful. It's one that like makes me think. And I think that's something that's very beautiful about a lot of films. Because it's not confusing. It's just, it makes you think. And like, I walked home from the theater and I was just thinking about it the whole time. So yeah, I would put it at the 9 out of 10 range for now. But it's definitely not in my top tier, because those are like my babies. But they're all my babies in some way. There's only 3 films that are like at my bottom that like I never rewatch ever again.
Well, when you're Ghibli, it's hard to be bad. I would say that.
Yeah.
So 2 9s from us. So obviously we're big fans. Let me know what you think of it. Let Cosette know, whether it's on our Discord or on Twitter or whatever, or in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the movie. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If I messed up on something and you interpreted something differently, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because there's so much that goes into it that, I mean, it's like, it's just so good. Like, there's so much to talk about. Like, I feel like we missed half of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I'll watch it again and I'll be like, oh, this scene from that part, I completely missed it. Like, it's gonna be one of those moments where it's like, yes, we need it. Oh, so
yeah,
good. So
I like comment on YouTube every time I remember something that I should have said. I'm just gonna comment on YouTube and just leave extra notes.
It's gonna be like, I have 300 comments on my YouTube. Oh, Cosette went off and saw the movie again. Okay, it's right on. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're huge fans. So if you're a huge fan, let us know. But thank you so much for joining me. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm glad that I could pick your brain a little bit on some of the Ghibli films, and I'm glad that you could come and bring your input on everything that is Ghibli. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to give a little bit of expertise, because I haven't watched a lot of anime like you have. When it comes to Ghibli, I'm right up there.
Exactly. And that's why we got you. So thank you so much. And I want to say thank you. And if you want to support us, the best way to do so is to like, comment, subscribe, leave a review on whatever platform you are watching or listening to us on. But until then, we will see you next time. Peace.